All right, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. As always, make sure you're subscribed. You're checking out the bell icon down there, making sure you're getting notifications. Like, comment, and share. And something tells me that my guest tonight is going to give everybody a little bit to comment about. Like him or hate him, love him or not. Representative Erik Mortensen is a figure who, in his brief stint in the Minnesota House of Representatives, has, shall we say, been a lightning rod, so to speak. So, Erik, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what district you represent, and what compelled you to run for office and then proceed to alienate yourself from, let's everybody.
Well, I guess I disagree with some of that, but yeah. So Erik Mortensen, I represent Shakopee, Louisville Township, Jackson Township, District 55A, and I ran for office first in 2018 when I took a look at the voting record of my state representative at the time, who was an incumbent Republican, and I, as a business owner, was getting slapped around by the state of Minnesota all over the place. And they clearly did not care about business owners and what it took to run a business. They certainly don't understand, the bureaucrats in St. Paul, what it takes to run a business. And I thought, well, is my representative representing me and fighting for Republican values? Small government, self-determination, fiscal discipline, free markets. And I started looking at his voting record, and it was horrible. And I started looking at the other Republicans' voting records in St. Paul, and they're largely all horrible. So I thought, well, I'll go down there and I'll try to do this myself, because in my mind, what we need is more representatives or senators or just legislators in general, kind of treating government the way government treats us. And that's often not in a very kind fashion. So that has certainly created a bit of a lightning rod when you take that mentality down there. But I don't feel as though I've alienated myself. I've done exactly what I told people I would do. In fact, just last week, the head of the Scott County DFL party flat out said in my town hall, "I give you credit." He said that you're doing exactly what you said you would do. So I've been taking a principled stance down there and shining a spotlight on what exactly happens in St. Paul. And by no surprise, not everybody likes it. Republicans will run on one thing and do something else, and that's why we've been losing our state and country for decades, frankly. So I haven't been hesitant to call that out. And when I've been sort of ordered by party bosses in my old caucus to stop being so transparent or else, I said, well, I'll take the or else then, because I ran to be transparent and introduce new levels of transparency. So I certainly don't feel like I've done that to myself. But the fact is, most of the people at the Capitol, they would rather operate in secrecy and help protect their fellow incumbents than actually do what they campaigned on.
Yeah, I think the thing that people have forgotten, is the now famous movie. Well, I won't say it's famous anymore because people have forgotten it too. But Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is one of those examples of a guy that runs for office, goes off to Washington, and is kind of like, what? and here at the more local level, not the purest of local levels, at the more local level, you went off to St. Paul and walked in and went, and the first time we met, face to face was at that event in Rochester, and the stories that you told of walking into meetings and whatnot, and the schmoozing and the rubbing elbows and the glad handing and the back slapping and the self-congratulatory, oh, hey, you made it, you're in the inner circle now kind of mentality. Yep. It's not just for the DFL, it's not just for leftist Democrats, it's repugnant in the Republican party as well. And it's what's destroying us. Now, there's some responsibility on the part of voters to say, why do I just keep voting for this person just because they have an R behind their name and assuming they're conservative credentials? and that's a little bit of what we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to, if we could, I want to talk just a little bit about not so much your experience, because that's all out there. Everybody's heard one side of it. Sure. I think there's a place for us to maybe in the future have a conversation going forward. But one of the things we talked about in our pre-show conversation was this idea of primarying. It's not even really a word, but
I use it all the time.
Right. But I mean, it's one of those things that it's even weird to try and say it and make it sound right. But primarying Republicans by Republicans.
Yeah.
And what about your experience in St. Paul as a freshman representative has made that abundantly clear to you? And did you have to do that to get your spot?
Yeah. So the first or last question, I guess, that's exactly what I did. Is I challenged an incumbent Republican. The party endorsed me overwhelmingly on the first ballot. I think it was like 70 to 30. Of course, the incumbent didn't appreciate that because they really do think these are their seats until they decide to give them up. They don't look at it as it's the people of their district seats. They think it's theirs. And in fact, the guy who was in the seat before me, what I had heard was he was hoping to sort of bequeath his seat to his son someday, which is just a disgusting thought. You know, this isn't a monarchy here, but so of course he challenged. I'd say he challenged me in a primary because I was the endorsed candidate, and I beat him in the primary by 16 points. And in 2018, I'm referring to Trump's first midterm. Of course, the Democrats had, their blue wave, and the seat flipped to a Democrat in 2018. So
how many years had it been since that seat had been in the hands of the Democrats?
Probably 20 years or something like that. It had been a while. So
that says a lot more about your opponent than it does you.
Well, and you look at 2018, there were like 16 suburban seats that flipped all around the metro area. Now, of course, my opponent at the time, who ran against me again in 2020, he was running around saying, well, he's the one that can win, and I can't possibly beat the Democrats because of what happened in 2018. And of course, he wants people to ignore the fact that the entire ring around the metro area flipped from red to blue in 2018. And in fact, in 2020, I was the only suburban Republican to actually take one of those seats back. So that's a big deal.
Well, Eric, it's your fault that they all flip blue. I just admit that now. So here you are, you primary a candidate, you guys end up fighting it off in the primary, you hold them off in the primary, you turn around because of the blue wave that rode in on the DFL's attack on Trump. You end up losing out in 2018. You make a run again for it in 2020, and you win. What did you win by? Over the DFL. Remember, this is everybody. He's the only one that took a seat that flipped from red to blue and flipped it back to red.
Yeah, and without any help from the HRCC, the kind of swampy establishment Republican caucus, or their campaign committee, rather, they did nothing to help me. In fact, they spent $30,000 against me in 2018, and they spent another $5,000 against me in 2020. So to take that seat back and not get any support from sort of that organization, that's a really big deal. And in one of the caucus meetings, they were congratulating me and saying, hey, that's really good. You're the only one who took back a suburban seat. And I just thought myself, I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, and nobody in this room lifted a finger to help me to do it either.
Right.
So in 2018, I lost, I think it was by like, what was it, 300 votes, 400 votes. And then in 2020, I won by about 600, 700 votes. So
really slim margins. Massive. Yeah, neither one of those are massive margins for the Twin Cities area, even in the suburbs. Yeah. You walk in, freshman, you have, and everybody knows this, that ostensibly the way party politics runs, you have no clout. You like you and I talked about this a little bit at that event. Unfortunately for you, you had to follow me.
Hey, you were great, man. You warmed everybody up.
That was strictly a joke. So, So you come in and you even said being in St. Paul, and even that day, like your tone had your tone had changed some because you thought you were walking into friendly territory to some degree. To some degree, you thought you had some allies up there, but
Yeah.
your first experience out of the gate was. And I don't want to paint all of them as RINOs, but
Sure.
we're dealing with some RINOs up there.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I would say 85% of them, I would safely call them RINOs. And you can look at the voting records. It's not just me. You can look at mnscorecard.com with a great scorecard. LEA has a great scorecard. I mean, there's things out there that says, and these scorecards that I'm referencing, they say, are you either growing government or shrinking government? And LEA looks at it as, are you voting in line with our founding principles and what's in the Constitution or not? And so those are very good scorecards to give you a good frame of reference. But, my mindset going in was, like you said, freshman, you have no clout. That was not my mindset at all. I refuse to take that. To me, that's a mentality issue.
Yep.
And so even as a business owner, when I first opened my business, and it was a franchise, so we had another, 15 franchisees that opened that year. I was listening to them, and just their mindset was, well, it's my first year, so I'm not going to do that well. And it's just, to me, it becomes this crutch that you lean on to say, well, my excuse is because I just opened. And I took that same mentality to St. Paul, or the opposite. So when I had my business, I said, I don't care how long I've been open, I'm shooting for the stars here. And that's been my mentality in St. Paul is I don't care if I'm a freshman. I don't care if they mock freshmen. I don't care about any of that stuff. There's no guarantee I'll be there more than 2 years. So I'm not going to mess around. But in that first caucus meeting, one of the senior representatives came up to me and said, hey, just don't do anything in the first 2 years. Just learn the process, he said. And I was like, are you kidding me? I didn't bust my butt for 3 years to get here to just sit around and do nothing. That's certainly not what I promised my constituents either. So encouraging me to not work on behalf of my district was, to me, highly, highly insulting, and said there's just no way I would do that.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said too for the idea of going up and doing this piggybacking and this pork barrel kind of legislation where you're doing things for your district, which mean I'm going to get us a new road, or am I actually representing the district? And you promised things. You said, I'm not going to go up there and be the status quo, same type of Republican representative or even DFL type of representative that's going to go up there and play nice.
Yeah,
and
well,
there's a place for decorum, but there's also a place to get out on the floor and say, look, no, this kind of stuff has to stop. And there's a huge difference between going out there and saying we're representatives of the people, we're servants. And that's one of the things I really respected about you at that event, when you recognized and you said right there, like, no, he's right. We're servants. And then, standing up and calling your fellow member of the House of Representatives racist for just being I'm not gonna mention the name, but I think we all know who we're talking about. So
yeah.
So what does it look like as a freshman in the House to go in there and say, I'm not here to play politics, I'm here to represent my people? What kind of things did you work on this first year?
Yeah, well, let me first hit on this because what I've seen, and I think it's what so many people's guts tell them what happens, because you hear somebody first run for office and they say the right things and you think, boy, this person really feels different and they're going to go down there and they're going to be a fighter for me, my values. And then they get to the Capitol, and the vast majority of the time, by far the vast majority of the time, they seem to change. And I think most people are kind of scratching their heads then going, that's not the kind of person I thought that guy was going to be, or that what I thought that kind of gal was going to be. And so what I've seen is, they try to do it to me, is they expect freshmen, just kind of like, first year business owners, they expect freshman lawmakers to be completely overwhelmed when they get to the Capitol and they see, the big marble buildings. And I think they take advantage of that, and they'll put their arm around those freshmen and say, "Hey, you know what? I gotcha. We're going to take care of you. We're so glad you're here." They'll say, like they did to me. "Oh, we're so glad to have you down here, and but here's what you got to
They
do."
did not know you.
No. Oh, it was so much fun. But they'll put their arm around them, and they will make them feel better. They'll try to make them feel like they're not as overwhelmed. They will definitely make freshmen feel like they have their back and that they will protect them in their seat. And that is largely what the Capitol is all about. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't really matter. What they're trying to do is protect their fellow incumbents. And it's not, people like to think then that means, well, it's about a team, that they're trying to be a team and operate as a team. Or even some people down there say we're a family. But I can tell you that is not the reality. And people need to know that because that's such a misconception that you just need to be on this team or that team. It's not about teams down there. What it is for them is it is about control. They want to control the other members within the legislature, even in their own party, so they can dictate their behavior, so that they can consolidate that power behind leadership. I mean, that is what's actually happening. And I think people's guts tell them that, but I think that's what makes my message a little more unique, especially as an elected official, because I'm not a politician. I'm an elected official, but politicians make all these political decisions on what's going to help them get reelected or advance their political career.
Yeah.
And as much as this might disappoint some people, I don't have political aspirations. I'm not here to climb the political ladder. I'm here to defend liberty for the future generations so that they too can capitalize on the American dream that I've capitalized on. That's it, period. And that makes, I can say for a fact, that makes me very, very different from other folks at the Capitol. And it also liberates me to be able to speak this candidly like I am now, because I'm not worried about political consequences. It's just not a concern of mine.
You know, there's a long history of statesmen versus politicians in the United States. And what we see very often is that the statesmen will be embraced by the politicians because the statesman makes the politicians look good. But behind the scenes, the statesman oftentimes is the pariah. They're cast out and they're marginalized for everything with the photo ops. And
right.
And what I want to see us do, or what I'd like to see us focus on, and I said this to you on the phone the other night as we were kind of prepping for this, and talking about what different directions we could go with the conversation. I was really, excited that you said, no, let's talk about what it means to primary people. We have right now, because of of a whole groundswell of things that is happening across the United States, but especially here in Minnesota, we have a group of people that have been awakened. They're not woke. They've been awakened to, as I mentioned to you, with helping out with certain city council and school board things that I've been doing here for for a while, but especially over the last month and a half now. We have people going, I can make a difference.
Yep.
And I don't have to go up to the state house. I don't have to go up to the national, federal level. I can make a difference locally. How important is it, do you think, to get people in at those levels? And will that prepare them to make a run like what you did and prepare them for a position like that?
Okay. So, and you've referenced the show prep a couple of times. I feel like I should tell people we haven't talked about these questions you're going to ask. So it's not like I've got some prepared answer here. So I'd break that down into.
That's because I don't write questions down.
Well, I'm not clearly operating off a script either. I break that down into two answers because I think there's kind of two questions. And the first one I heard was, how important is it to get people involved at that local level? And it is the most important thing you could possibly do, is to get involved, to find something you're passionate about, whether it's your school board and what's going on in your schools, if it's your city, if it's your county, if it's the state. Please, 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 the people watching now or later, you've got to get involved. I will tell you for a fact, complaining on Facebook will do nothing. It's a waste of time. Get off of it. Get out there and get in your community, contact people like me. We've got all sorts of opportunities to get involved. So it's hugely, hugely important. Now, how important is it to start at the, say, run for city council or school board and kind of work your way into state rep, state senator? There are certainly people that think it is critical. There are people that can't stand the fact that I skipped those steps and ran for a state rep position. But so of course,
It's not like you've done anything else normal through all of this. So.
Right. Well, I think it's not. I don't think it's important at all, quite honestly. And I don't know if you plan on talking more about what it takes to kind of primary people, or you just to run for office.
Oh no, that's exactly where we're going. I just want people
perfect.
to.
Because
Erik is not saying don't run for city council. He's also not saying don't run for county commission or for school board. What he's saying is don't think that's your only inroad.
Absolutely. Don't think that at all. And though I'll end this point with, and you can fire away with other stuff, is running for state rep, running for state senator, it is not as intimidating as you might think. I think people naturally, when they think of running for something like that, they think about, man, I see these commercials, for, against president, against Trump or against Biden or against these, U.S. senators. And they think they're going to be on TV and there's going to be these, attack ads. And it's not like that. So I want to put people's mind at ease if you're out there thinking about doing it.
Oh, well, you probably didn't have a history they could attack. They would melt me into slag. So I have.
Yeah, if you have skeletons, they will find them. That's for sure. But
yeah. So, and I wanted people to hear you say that, like, no, those are important offices. Those are important positions for you to go and serve as public servants, as elected servants in. Those are even planning and zoning commissions, library board. Those things are incredibly important because they do help us keep an agenda tamped down, and they do prepare you for what it looks like. But
it is.
But what Erik and I did talk about the other day, and what everybody has heard me say is we have to start being responsible for making the change because, like Erik said, complaining about it on Facebook or complaining about it over the dinner table to your family, it's not enough. It never has been enough. And so a lot of where we're at right now is directly the fault and the responsibility of the people who just sit around and complain and don't do anything. Now is the time to take this groundswell and look at your local member of the House of Representatives or the Senate and say, here at the state level, no, you're not doing anything. You aren't doing anything. Like, how many years have you been up there? What difference have you made? And I mentioned my particular congressional district. I'm not going to throw any names out there right now, but I would love to see somebody make a primary run. And sometimes that primary run is all it takes is to wake these guys up and go, wait a minute, yeah. I need to do something.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. And anybody's thinking about it, I'm totally available. I'm dying to talk to the people who want to do this. In fact, I spoke to 2 yesterday. I mean, one of the massive wins that I see, because we're in the minority in the House, so there's not a lot of legislative wins. Although I will say I've passed as many or more bills out of the House than 90% of the other Republicans. So that is something I had to do the research for a couple of weeks ago to see, well, what does that look like? And so I'm proud of that. But you can absolutely get involved and do these things. It's really doesn't have to be that overwhelming at all. So reach out to me if you're even thinking about doing it, because you can have a strategy behind it. Like you're saying, you could say, I want to make a serious run at this and be very serious. Or you can say, you know what, I at least want to send a message that we're watching and this seat is not safe. It's not guaranteed. And even if that's the approach you want to take, it doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, I would encourage you not to make that widely known, but you could say, hey, I'm going to put my name on a ballot. I'm at least going to make these guys, try to scare them back in line, because the most important thing that I try to tell people any opportunity I can is it's really the people across the state, the people across the country. It's you that carry and wield all of the political power. You have the power. The problem we've had lately is people are kind of complacent and they're not using the power, they're not exercising the power. But this mindset that even the politicians, and I'm not a politician, so I use this term pretty loosely. The politicians of the Capitol, they want you to think that it is them in the Capitol building on a hill in St. Paul, that they have all the power. They don't. They really don't have really any power. All they do is they push buttons on their desk. You demand which button they push. And I tell you what, being politicians, they're going to push whatever button they think they have to in order to get reelected. They just need to feel that pressure from the people. So that's what I'm super proud of, is having unified all sorts of grassroots Minnesotans and energize them to get involved and to want to take some action. That's what I'm by far most proud of. So the people that say I'm alone, I literally laugh at them and go, I am not alone. Maybe in the Capitol building it can be lonely, but outside the Capitol, the people actually matter. That's where I've been aligned with, and I'm by far not alone there.
On a personal level, and I have to call you out, and and I want this to hurt. Okay. So, you stuck us with Jake on Saturday, Erik, and Julie was crying. She was in tears, and she's like, Mort was supposed to be here. We had to settle for Duesenberg. I felt like I had to call out Carnahan. I mean, that might have been my own problem. And I still want people to understand Jen Carnahan, the Republican base, the conservative base, we're coming for you. And when we're done, the true conservatives of Rocks and Cows, Minnesota, Erik's not quite out. See, I'm so confused because of what you did to me on Saturday. Rocks and Cows, Minnesota conservatives, you could try and push us out, but it's our party and we're going to take it back. But in all seriousness, like, we were thankful that you made connections with Jake and had him there, because he said what a lot of people needed to hear. It's time for grassroots Republican activists to get up, stand up, and say enough is enough. Why govern from the middle when you're governing from the middle? All you're doing is compromising with the left. All they've managed to do in the House of Representatives since they lost the House. I mean, I can remember in recent history when it was a Republican-controlled House.
Yep.
And we've lost it, and all we've managed to do is move further to the left. The Republicans in the House haven't gone to the right more. They've gone more to the center, more to the left, to try and get along, and it's done us not a damn bit of good.
Yeah, they're scared to death. They're scared to death. When they get the majority, they're scared of losing it. So instead of being bold and delivering on the things that they campaigned on, which is what drives me nuts, they campaign on it for 7-8 months, and then they get elected, they take the House, and then they don't do any of it. And then now when they're in the minority, they start trying to introduce and force votes on Second Amendment legislation. Where it's like, why didn't you have a vote on Stand Your Ground when you had the majority? So,
well, it's because they can advance the legislation now when they're a minority, say that they've advanced it, but it was out of their hands to pass it, and then they don't have to look like radical Second Amendment freaks.
Exactly.
So I want to bounce this off of you as we're talking about primarying people. We have, and I'm going to throw the name out there, we've got John Thompson right now, who campaigned as a radical Marxist leftist, threatened to burn down Hugo. And I have videos that I've done that predate his election. I was warning people this was going to happen. They're on my channel, and I'll put the link in so people can see this. I warned everybody he was a crackpot, that he was dangerous. And you don't show up in Hugo, Minnesota, and threaten to burn down Hugo because they won't kick Bob Kroll out.
Yeah.
But here we have a guy like John Thompson in the Republican Party. In the House, the House Republicans go, okay, DFL, we'll give you until 7 p.m. on Wednesday to do something about this. My take on this is, no, Republican Party, you make the move and force the Democrats to either defend him or get rid of him. you destroy the DFL when you do that. But no, we're gonna let them deal with their own. And do you think that's an example of the sickness that has permeated the party within the House?
Well, I think to me, what is happening at the Capitol, and they're just not transparent about it, is it's always politics. It's always jockeying for position, and that's why, like you said, they'll force votes on, say, pro 2A bills when they're in the minority because they get to look like tough guys. But when they're in the majority, they won't do it because, again, they're playing politics. They're trying to protect what they think they've built and how to take the majority back. And I can understand that you have to ultimately get the majority oftentimes, get something done. So there has to be some strategy behind that. But when you get it back and you refuse to fight for the values you claim to believe in, that's what I think a ton of us take a lot of umbrage with. Because when the left wins, well, the Democrats, I've been there for 6 months. They crammed so many things through that they knew they wouldn't get past the Republican-controlled Senate, but they didn't care. They were going to force the issue, force the vote, and get people on record and be able to tell their supporters, well, just look at us. We're trying. We're fighting for what we believe in. But
it's those nasty Republicans in the Senate that are trying to kill you.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate that the Republicans refuse to fight as hard as Democrats. That's what my point is, and it's frustrating. So what my intent is, and they know it. Okay, this is what's so interesting is this is why the HRCC spends so much money against me. They know I'm not interested in these games. I'm interested in results. I'm a business person. So they know that my intent is to force these votes on these difficult issues. They should be difficult because this is what they campaigned on. But they don't want to have to take those votes because they know it'll piss some people off. And if they piss someone off, it lessens their likelihood of getting reelected. And that is the core of what they care about. Keep me here, keep us in office. That's what they care about. It's not about results. It's not about principles. It's just they want to stay in the club. That's what it is.
Let's talk for just a minute about the feedback from your constituency, Erik. I mean, there again, and I say it tongue in cheek, you're kind of a lightning rod. Like there has been no lack of coverage, either through social media or whatnot, of kind of some of the storm that has surrounded your explosion onto the scene. But what's your constituency saying to you? What are you hearing by way of feedback from both sides in is it House District 55A?
Yeah, 55A. Well, I'll start off by saying yeah, there has been, attention thrown at what I've been doing, but it's another form, depending on what who's publishing what. But when the attacks come out against me, it's just another form of trying to force people to comply. Fall behind leadership, to go along, to get along, legislator, and it's immense pressure. I'm not going to tell people it's not. So the people, one of the first things I tell people when they're thinking of running is, you have to be able to accept being disliked by politicians, and you have to be willing to stand up to that immense pressure. Yeah, I have no problem with any of those people. I don't care what they think of me. It's not a concern of mine. But most of them down there, they cannot stand the thought of being disliked by somebody. It drives them nuts. Of course, if they're disliked by people, then they might not get reelected. It all comes back to that. All roads lead, for the politicians in St. Paul, all roads lead to what helps me stay in office. But yeah, and the district has been great. I mean, it's awesome how many people reach out, people that, I've never even heard from politically, that'll just reach out of the blue and say, hey, sorry, I've never, reached out, but thank you for what you're doing. I appreciate it. And I'm not going to obviously get into the names of locals here, but that's the most rewarding thing for me, because all I care about, again, is results and trying to deliver them for people. Although they're turning the ship in St. Paul is not a 6-month thing, but people are really appreciative of the fact that I'm at least standing up for what I said I would stand up for, and pushing back and trying to stand between the people of my district and the radical leftist agenda. And even though oftentimes I feel like I'm the only one who's sincerely standing in between, the people of my district and that agenda, I think eventually that people will come and enjoy me there in a sincere way, and where they're actually, putting forward efforts to fight. And I think a really easy way to see if someone's actually there and they're in the battle and not just paying a lip service is the way you kicked off that question. Hey, there's been a lightning rod, there's been no lack of coverage. And when people ask me about, I don't know, who's a state rep, Schumacher, what's the guy's name? Rasmussen. Something about some guy Rasmussen. Hey, what do you think of Rasmussen? I'm like, I don't know. I've never met the guy, never heard of the guy. And if you're not making noise, and if I've never heard of you, you're probably not doing much to fight for your constituents. So I think that's a really quick litmus test. If you hear a name, you're like, who? Never heard of that person? Well, they're probably not doing much of anything at the Capitol.
And there's two ways of looking at that too. And it's the person whose name you do know is either doing the right things or you don't like them. That's just really the way it is.
And that's, again, if you go back to, that's why they don't do anything bold, because sure, some people might appreciate it, but a lot of other people, they're not going to appreciate it. And we're a 50-50 state. So you could say, well, you're going to make half the people in the state dislike you more. And again, does that hurt their reelection? And that, I can't emphasize it enough. And I think in people's guts, they know that's what politicians care about. And so I'm here to confirm your gut is right. That's what they care about. Get reelected. I don't care what they tell you to your face at the county fair, because they're never going to admit, all I care about is getting reelected. But I tell you for a fact, that's it. And even the fact that people that I was closest to at the Capitol, they stabbed me in the back in order to preserve their political career. And it's really pathetic.
Yeah, the biggest problem is that we've got this power base idea that somehow we have to consolidate power in the Capitol. Yeah. And it's a consolidation of power that is going to give us the ability to fight back. And it's not that we don't want the power, but what we have to recognize is that the power comes from the constituency.
Yes.
And that if we're consolidating power around leadership, but we're not representing the people that we've been elected to represent,
right?
Then we're not. All the power we have is really just for us, and it's literally. And I'm representing myself, and so, what are some things that a person can look for in their local representatives, whether it be at the House or at the Senate? What are some things they can look for that's gonna make them sit back and go, maybe we should be finding a candidate to run against this Yahoo, because sure, he's a Republican and has been for as long as I've known him, but but is he governing like a Republican, or is he more like a sheep that's just there to make sure he has an office in a corner with a window?
Yep. So I'm just making a quick note, and but I'll hit on this right now. So I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. Are you good and clear? I can manage it, but if everybody else is hearing, you're good. Okay. So let me kind of start top picture and drill in. And the first thing I think people need to know, because I heard from a constituent last week in my town hall. She said, I hear what you're saying, but I've met some of these people at the Capitol and they're good people. And so she has this, what's the term I'm looking for? Sort of this cognitive dissonance taking place, where she's hearing me say, hey, these guys say one thing and they do something else, but she has a personal relationship with them and she's going, but I know that person, or I know these people, they're good people. So to kick this off and to help with that, people need to understand it is 100% possible, and it's more likely this is the case with almost everybody at the Capitol. You can be a good person, but be a bad legislator. Now, that is entirely possible. So you can be a good person, but you can lack the courage of your convictions to do what you said you would do. Because largely they don't want people to know what actually happens, because the less people know, the less they can be held accountable. So they're always trying to skirt and prey on people's ignorance. So You have to know that. They may be your state rep, might be the nicest person on the planet. You might sit next to them in church every Sunday. It doesn't mean they're a good legislator. So that, I would say, to kick that off, to kind of drill down a little deeper then, and I literally came up with this like 10 days ago. So we'll try it out. Because even I've been going, how do I explain this to people? Because it's so counterintuitive from what has been drilled in people's heads for years, their whole lives sometimes. So here's, make sure you guys see my hands. And this is maybe this isn't the best way to explain it, but what we have going on, if we're talking about primary Republicans, I say there's 3 tiers of Republicans in the Capitol. You've got this bottom tier, and this bottom tier is what I would call, colorfully, the bottom feeders, the button pushers, the lapdog legislators, that go along to get along, the people who will do whatever it is party leadership says you must do. And make no mistake, party leadership orders their members, their legislators around, and they do the same thing they did to me. They say, do as we tell you to do or else. That or else can mean a whole bunch of things. So you've got this bottom feeder group, and I would say that's probably that 85% number, which is so unfortunate. And then that second tier is, kind of the second tier, the people that at least show an occasional independent thought. And at least at a bare minimum, the way I define them is they at least vote well. When you look at the scorecards I was referring to, you can look at it and go, oh, they vote 95% of the time with the Constitution. That's good. Which is still way better than the bottom feeder group is typically a third to maybe 50% of the time in line with the Constitution, which I'm sure shocks some people, and some people hearing this are thinking that guy's full of it, but look it up. The second tier, so they at least vote well. And then, let's see, my finger's back in here. But then I think there's a third tier, and largely I think that's the kind of the ceiling that I broke through by saying, look, you can both vote well, but you can still fight. And that to me is the third tier. And by fighting, I mean you can say, and I think we should be saying, look, we need to be demanding more from the bottom tier, and saying, look, we need to drag you guys up and get you voting better. And we should drag up second tier Republicans into the third tier to kind of help with that third tier and say, look, our job should be providing some alternative leadership here to say, look, we are not delivering on what we promised people. So let's drag those people up, getting voted better, and then hopefully get some help at that top tier to say, look, we all got to start dragging the Republicans in the path that we all campaigned on, which isn't asking for much. It's just doing what you said you would do. So that I think is important to kind of hear, because you can look at a second tier legislator that votes really well, but are they fighting or not? Or are they just refusing to fight because they don't want to, ruin their friendship with the people at the bottom tier? And that is exactly what's happening. That becomes the big difference and shift, and that I'm trying to help expose and lead to improve upon. So I say, look at the scorecards. I look at mnscorecard.com, look at lea-mn.org for scorecards, and just see how are people voting. And if they're not at least in that second tier, I think they are ripe to be primaried 100%. I mean, because I think as a conservative Republican who talks to a ton of conservative Republicans, at the bare minimum, you should at least vote like a conservative Republican. That's what you tell people you are. So the people who aren't in that second tier at a minimum, I think they're fair game. And again, that's like 85% of them. So I kind of laugh when people say, well, hey, what do you think of, let's see, Greg Davids? What do you think of Rep. Greg Davids? I'll be like, why are you even asking me? I mean, the chances are they suck. So just don't even ask me. Odds are they're not good. So and I'm happy to help people with that stuff too. Like, please.
And thanks for throwing my district under the bus.
Is he yours? Oh man, that's the guy who wants to. He bailed out Obamacare in Minnesota. I mean, that's like not a free market mind. It's horrible. But
he is an insurance agent, so.
Oh yeah, so that would explain it.
So here's the thing, and I'm gonna in TC style, I'm going to tell you what Erik is saying, because I'm super smart, right? With sarcasm. What Erik is telling you is that the bottom tier that he's got right here, because he's got to make sure he's got his hands in the right spot. So he said the bottom tier is here. The bottom tier is the leadership of the Republicans in the House. Yes. So when he says bottom tier, he's actually talking about these people up here. If you want to look at it as a pyramid, the bottom tier is actually at the top of the pyramid of leadership in the Republican Party in the House. And they take their orders from watch this. Here's some
you're outdoing me with the hands.
I'm Madonna videos, so or I'm landing airplanes. But people like the Republican Party of Minnesota, Jen Carnahan and others, are giving their orders to the bottom tier, saying, here's what we're going to do. Because they're not interested in representing the party. They're not interested in representing the people the way the people want. And so that bottom tier, that leadership base, is very interested in staying in the good graces of the party. And Erik, you've mentioned what's the finance group, the HR what?
The HRCC is the House Republican Campaign Committee. So that's the campaign committee of the House Republicans. And boy, that is, I mean, if you want to know who the St. Paul swamp, at least on the Republican side, is, it's the HRCC. I mean, they have campaigned against some of the most conservative Republicans across the state, including me.
Right. And that's what I want people to understand, is that you have you have sitting before you as you watch this on whatever platform you're watching it on, you have a guy who ran without any support, challenged an incumbent, and then got the nomination, lost, came back, took the seat with no support from the Republican Party. And he still remained in the Republican Party because, as I've already said, just another just another friendly reminder for you, Jen. It's our party. It's our party. And he stayed because it's our party. The problem is we're not willing to shatter the image of Minnesota nice. And we have got to get out of that. And we have got to tell the Republican Party leadership, not just in the state Senate and the state House, but we have to tell the Republican Party leadership, enough of the compromise, enough of the sitting here in the middle, enough of the reaching across the aisle, as I said when Erik and I met for the very first time in my presentation that day. Like, I know let's cut off that side of the house. I'm done. And if you're trying to reach across the aisle and you lose an arm in the process, so be it. Like, so be it. Because I don't want anything to do with them. That's the party of the John Thompsons. That's the party of the Keith Ellisons. That's the party of the Tim Wallses.
Right.
Why are you trying to meet them in the middle? Because they're going to pull you further to the left. And the people who voted for you they don't want that. They don't want you to go that direction. And here you have a guy who's willing to stay solidly on the base of conservative rocks and cows, Minnesota, and they won't support him.
It's like the state party and certainly leadership of the Capitol. It's like they completely forgot Donald Trump ever existed and that he lost Minnesota by 1.5 points. It was so close. But what the people saw in him, and you hear mayors over the Iron Range talking about this. Mayors in the Iron Range endorsed Donald Trump. They said, yeah, the guy's actually fighting for our industry. He's fighting for our values. But then they would say, oh, but at the state level, we're still going to vote DFL. And I think at the core of it is because Republicans aren't showing any backbone. They're not fighting. And instead, they think, well, Minnesota is this deep blue state, so we just need to moderate and be Democrat light. But when you do that, you show that the message that people get is there's no opposition party anymore. So what I think we need to be willing to do is to show that we are in opposition of the crazy communists and the Marxists out there, and that we're willing to stand in between them and the Minnesotans who don't want anything to do with that, But instead, you have Republicans thinking, well, to get elected, we maybe need to moderate here. And I hear from tons and tons of people. I mean, literally tons of people who say they're done with the GOP. They've lost hope. And I'm trying to restore some of that hope and energize people.
People will vote for a conservative candidate if they're just presenting themselves right now.
Right.
They will support. You announce right now, like you will beat a primary challenge. In a primary challenge, you will beat the incumbent if your incumbent is not a genuine conservative.
Yeah, I totally agree. I won in the primary last year by another 10 points. And I just heard that the guy I've ran against twice, the Republican, he's going to run again in 2022 against me. So these guys.
Well, he's got the HRCC money. So
exactly. Yeah. He thinks that's going to get him over the finish line. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think the only thing more fun than beating him once and then beating him twice is going to be beating him a third time.
and anything I can do to help. So if that means taking the video down, let me know.
Oh, no way. I don't run away from my message, man.
There's a scene and Erik, you come off and everybody knows this. You're kind of this down to earth guy, but I know you're a lot smarter. I could tell by talking to you several times. You're just like, oh, well, I don't know. Like you're sharp, dude. So don't even pretend. So you try to come off like I'm just like everybody else. You are so sharp. I know you're at Animal Farm.
Yeah.
Maybe a long time ago.
Yeah.
But there's a scene at the end of Orwell's Animal Farm where all of the animals have gathered around the farmhouse. We remember that because you weren't supposed to go to the farmhouse because that's where humans hung out. And in one of the end scenes, all of the farmyard animals after the revolution have gathered around a window at the back of the farmhouse, and they look in and they see the pigs who have taken over sitting around a table drinking alcohol. No, okay, I like a drink once in a while. But they're all drinking alcohol, which was forbidden, and playing cards, which was forbidden, sitting at a table and wearing clothing and playing cards with people. And I have used this, made it my own, but at the end, they can't tell the difference between the pigs and the people. And we are at that place here in the state of Minnesota with the Republican Party, whether it be in the House or in the Senate, a lot of times. Like, I'm just going to throw out a name, Paul Gazelka. I'm not going to say Kurt Dowd. The views expressed on this channel are my own. But the pigs look like the people. The pigs look like the people. There are so many instances right now of sitting members of the House of Representatives and in the Senate where you can't tell the difference. You cannot tell a difference between them at all about who's the Republican and who's the Democrat, because they all spend so much time trying to bridge the gap and find that middle ground where we can be in agreement. That the Minnesota Nice has devastated the effectiveness of the conservative base of the party, and they all look the same. And so, of course, a guy like you, Erik, is going to walk in and is going to say the things that you're saying and just completely disrupt just everything. Like there's a place for that. It needs to be done.
I think it has to be. You know, if there's one thing, and people will argue about this, but I know Trump was far more conservative than I thought he was going to be. But I think
I didn't vote for him in 2016, to be honest with you, because I'm like, really? I know we can't be friends anymore.
I had my doubts, but he impressed me really the way he took on the media in particular. But
in party leadership, surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I think that people are inspired by that, and I forgot what I was going to say about it, but all right, carry on.
The pigs looking like the people, and everybody being, and compromising and all that.
Well, I mean, what I would add to that is it's it's so much like professional wrestling, and I've seen it on the house floor, and you see these people doing these things, and the way that leadership was trying to squash me and what I was doing. But I know what I was going to say. The one thing that Trump disappointed on, and some people might disagree, he never really did drain the swamp. And
Right.
fundamentally, somebody said this to me after one of my videos I posted, and they said, you realize what you're doing is you're taking the necessary actions to actually drain the swamp in St. Paul. And I went, yeah, actually, you're right. And that doesn't make me a popular person in St. Paul by any means, but I don't care about whether those people like me or not. Frankly, it doesn't matter if they like me.
Right.
It's the people in the state that need to know they have the power, and they just need to know they need the information to be empowered and know how to hold people accountable. And that's fundamentally what I'm trying to do, or one of the things is make sure the people across the state are they know how to hold politicians accountable, and they have the information to do it. So I'm dying for people to reach out, and I hear from people a lot, but the more the better, because the time is running out.
So Erik, you are a conservative grassroots Republican because you hate people, correct?
Isn't it just ridiculous what they say? I mean, when they just pull out the race card and you hate people card. But you mentioned something that I want to hit on. I'm sorry, this is kind of.
Was that the note you were taking? I said something memorable.
No, that's no note. So you talked about the party, and it's our party. And somebody I heard they give this analogy once, and I thought, man, that is spot on. I'm stealing it. So I'm stealing it again tonight. And so the analogy is this: the parties are just vessels, like my water cup here. It's a vessel. And so you've got, your major parties. This is the Republican Party. And you had, I don't know what you had in your cup over there. Booze, it sounds like. I have water in this.
Not yeah. Oh, see, his etiquette is so much better. I have just water, he says. I needed a drink to settle myself down for this conversation, Mortensen.
But the important thing is the party, all that matters is what you put into it. Just like this vessel, I can put beer, water, vodka, I can put whatever I want in here. It's just, are we putting the right people into our party? And more specifically, are we putting the right elected officials in office? And what I've been telling people, and this is so timely, people get in this mindset of, well, come election day, I just have to vote for the guy with the R or the girl with the R behind their name. And I actually had an activist a couple of months ago say, well, conservatives were not all that loud, but on election day, you can count on us showing up. And I had to tell her, look, it's not good enough. Election day that's like harvesting day. But right now it's planting season. Right. And by planting season, I mean finding better candidates to fill these positions. The entire state government in November 2022 is up for re-election. Secretary of State, Attorney General, Governor, every single state senator, every single state rep. So now it's planting season. And if you don't do the planting now, there's nothing to harvest in November 2022. So I hope people can think about that and go out there and do something.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing that I want. I just had this conversation in a Facebook group and it just blew my mind that I was even having to have this conversation. I had interviewed Lynn Torgerson, and she's announced for Attorney General. And the person was arguing with me that, we have to go with Wardlow. And I'm like, hey, maybe Wardlow is the better option than Lynn. I was very impressed with Lynn's position. She's like, I've got experience and on and on and on. And so I posted the video, and this person's like, well, she can't win. And I'm like, why can't she win? And it was like, oh, well, I don't like her haircut. And, and it's, oh, well, she doesn't have the experience. Wardlow's got the name recognition. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I don't, I've been trying to find a way to get Wardlow on and talk to him. He won't, or no one's passing the message on to him.
I got his number.
Well, you tell him he needs to come on with me.
Yeah.
Because, I'm important. But here's what we have is we have a situation where it's the same mentality that the Republicans are guilty of all the time. The Republican constituency is guilty of this. Well, I got to vote for whoever can win. And the problem that we have is oftentimes the person that we vote for because they can win ends up not representing us. Sure, they can win, but what good does it do to put somebody in who wins or can win but doesn't do what we expect them to do when they get there? And that I'm done with that. I have been for a while, but I'm done. I'm done because what we've seen for the last year and a half is we've seen a lot of people talk about what they're going to do, but not actually taking any action. And I mentioned this there again. I'll go back to when we met there a few months ago. It's this interview process. Freaking running for office is nothing more than a giant interview process. And if we owned a business, you own a business. If somebody came and interviewed for a position with your company and told you all these things that they were going to do to help you succeed as a business owner and help you be a better business, and then the day they walked in, they came in a suit and tie and said, by the way, I'm here and I'm taking over and I'm not answering any of your questions, and I expect you to pay me and call and schedule an appointment if you'd like to speak with me. You'd be like, dude, get your butt out of my office. You're fired. Yeah. But what do we do with the people that we elect? We let them campaign for office for sometimes 4 years, and then they get into office and they act like they're in charge. And like, no, we're done. You're going to start answering questions. And that's why I told everybody at the event on Saturday, like, if somebody's coming up here running for office, they get like 10 minutes to speak, and now they're going to answer questions.
Oh, I totally agree. I've been going to all sorts of groups, that invite me to speak, and I give them a little advice to the organizers that, hey, look, I first of all, my advice is I'd be very cautious inviting politicians to speak to your organization, because it, first of all, legitimizes them, and I would be very selective about having them come out and speak. But if you do, you better they have to agree to answer questions. They just have to. They don't just get a platform to say how great they are. They have to say, be accountable and answer questions. So I totally agree.
That might be why Julie asked me to MC. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, Erik, what can we do to help you build a base in the Republican Party going forward? We've already talked about primarying people, but what can we do to actually help you going forward? Because it is lonely in the Capitol. It's lonely up there. And you know what? And if you need a visitor, you just let me know. You get me in, I'll come visit you during session.
I can't wait for them to open up the office building to the public again. I think people are going to be taken by storm when people are finally allowed back in there. I think people are pissed off.
Let's clarify. He's not talking about actually storming the Capitol. We're not.
Yeah, fair. But people are going to march in, and they're going to make sure.
We're going to visit. That's what.
Well, you're toning it down, huh? I'm the guy in office. I'm supposed to be toning it down. But I hope people do. People need to show up. They need their faces in the building. They need to be heard from. So you can go to my website. You go to mortforhouse.com. We've got all sorts of ways to get involved. You can sign up to volunteer. You can come out. You can make a donation there. My seat is highly, highly targeted. I won by 600 votes. The guy before me, the Democrat, won by like 300 votes. The Democrats are eyeing this district. The Republicans have already recruited somebody to primary me. The entire political establishment of both parties are coming after me in this seat in 2022. So if anybody's watching this and going, I appreciate what this guy's doing, I could really use support, because taking on the entire state government essentially next year is going to be, climbing Mount Everest. So,
when you're getting that much heat, you're doing something right. Now, and you could be a jerk and be breaking laws, and accusing cops of being racist and other things, and get protected. But when you're taking the kind of heat that you're taking, Erik, and I want people to understand this, he's doing something right. There's the old saying from World War II, and I quote this often, especially when I'm speaking in public. They would tell the pilots of the bombers that the fighter planes, the escorts would peel away at some point. and the flying fortresses would come in and they would say, hey, when you're taking flak, you're over the target. And that was their way of knowing, like, you're right where you need to be. Just stop worrying and start dropping your bombs.
Yep.
And we're speaking metaphorically right now. and that's the thing is, Eriks, you're taking flak because you're over the target. You're making people uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's what it takes to get people out of being settled into the position of oh, I've got this, I'm nailing this because I've been at this for so long. No, we need to start removing Republican leadership that's not doing their job. Yep. And that's in the party level, at the statewide party level, that county and districts. If they're not playing, and I shouldn't say playing, I don't want them playing games. We want them to do what we put them in those positions to do. And if they're not going to do that, they're gone. If you want to oust 75% of your party because they dare to affiliate with Jake Duesenberg and Action for Liberty, let's be honest, that's what she said. She needs to go. She needs to go. And so does every single person that supports what she said. And so do the representatives and the state senators and other people who are in elected positions who don't have a problem with that. Anybody that hasn't spoke out against what Jen Carnahan said is an opponent, and they need to get primaried and get their butts out of office.
And the hypocrisy of
Sorry,
what she said.
I'm fired up.
No, the hypocrisy, because there are those of us that are saying, look, if you're not really, look, I get if you're in a suburban area, you're kind of this swing place, there's room to say, well, you know, I'm kind of pro this and anti that, but there should be, you know, I look at it like McDonald's. There's a brand, McDonald's. You go get a Big Mac in Shakopee or a Big Mac in Rochester, it's going to be the same. And there needs to be those core half a dozen things that, you know, when you vote Republican, they're going to be rock solid on those 6 things. But we don't have those here.
Right.
So the hypocrisy of her to say, well, the people who actually want principled Republicans, oh, and then the fact that I want them primaried and gone, that I'm a bad person. And then she turns around and says, well, then we want you gone. And not that she said it about me, but it's like,
no, she painted all of us in that. That's like, don't take don't take this wrong. If she had just said, hey, we need Mortensen gone, I could understand that. I could understand her reasoning, because you're making them look bad. And in a good, and from my perspective, in a good way.
Yeah.
But she wants us all gone. She wants us all forced out.
I think, and if you were to you know, poll your average Republican voter and say, hey, if you had to purge one group of people from the party, would it be the RINOs or would it be the principled Republicans? I think they would all say, yeah, let's get rid of the RINOs. So the fact that the chair of the party came out and said, yeah, I think we should purge the people who are actually fighting and want principled candidates in office, that is asinine. In fact, out of all the people that I admit this begrudgingly, in my time in politics, I've endorsed one person, Jennifer Carnahan. 6 months later, I said, I'm revoking it, take my name off everything you've ever put it on, because she attacked the grassroots Republicans at the state fair several years ago by saying, if you fly a Trump flag on a ride at the state fair, she said, there's no place for you in this party. And I'm going, how does she do this? And apparently the state fair threatened to get rid of the state party's booth at the state fair if they allowed this to happen. And I think the fighter in me says, Carnahan should have said, bring it on. We dare
you to remove
to take away our booth. If you take away the Republican Party's booth at the state fair, it probably would have been the best fundraising year the Republican Party would have ever had, because they could have come out and said, that's how corrupt Minnesota is. They took away one major party's booth from the state fair, and people would have said, to hell with that, and they would have had massive volunteers, massive fundraising. But instead of attacking the state fair, she caves and threatens grassroots conservatives to kick them out of the party if they fly a Trump flag. It was so sad.
And that's what I want people to understand. Look, for all 5 of you that are going to watch this. So sorry, Erik, you're not going to get a lot. Okay, you might push this out when it goes out, so it'll like your base will watch this. And self-deprecating humor is the best kind. Yeah. Because who cares if I offend myself? But I want people to understand, like, I'm not talking about going out there and being vulgar and violent in calling names on the House floor or in Republican Party meetings or anything like that. I'm talking about being strong and being stringent and saying enough is enough. This is our party, and we're taking it back. And if that means that you show up at your local county fair and you forget the DFL, you're not going to change any minds over there. I'm not saying don't engage in debate. Like, I would love for somebody who disagrees with me. I would love for somebody who doesn't like Erik to come on my channel and tell me why we're wrong. Tell me why Erik is wrong and how he's actually doing I will let you talk. No one's going to take me up on this. I guarantee you, you could drop this in Jen Carnahan's inbox on Facebook or whatever. Jen, come on my channel. Come on my channel and let's have a conversation. You won't do it. You won't do it because I'm one of those. But come on here and tell me why I'm wrong. But you, regular grassroots, rocks and cows Republican, show up at your county fair. Show up at the county fair and go talk to the county fair person manning the Republican booth and ask them what they think of Jen Carnahan telling them that we're going to get rid of the rocks and the cows. Ask them. And if they don't know what they're talking about, they need to go too. Because
there's a lot of work to be done.
That's the problem.
I just want to emphasize again.
Rant over.
No, that's fine. I just want to emphasize again that anybody who's watching this now, later, whenever, if you're thinking of running for office, you're thinking you want to step up to the plate and get involved in other ways, be more effective politically. I met one group who they've got a great issue that, it's like 90% of people agree with, and they've been fighting for it at the Capitol for 22 years, and they haven't been able to get over the finish line. And I met with them probably January, and we kind of talked about different ways to engage and try to advocate for your issue. And I asked them afterwards, what did you think? And they said, wow, apparently we've been doing this wrong the whole time. And to think about 22 years in battling for this, and it's coming at it just the wrong way. So there's so many powerful ways you can actually get the politicians to change their behavior, but you have to be persistent. It's not send one email and go there. I sent him an email. It's like, no, you need to do way more than that, or do it every day. You have to be consistently in their ear, and there's ways to do it.
And that's the thing for all of and I say this affectionately, all my little city council people who are showing up to city council meetings and school board meetings. Hey, guess what? Erik, when do you guys go back into session? January?
February.
You guys. Hey, in February of 2022, when the House and the Senate go back into session, don't forget they're in session. Start showing up there. Let's see. I don't know. Maybe if every single one of these little rocks and cows podunk towns with all these citizen grassroots groups that are showing up now to meetings and causing all this turmoil. Imagine what it would look like if we showed up peacefully and civilly and with decorum, but we showed up in the House and we stood right over the balcony and looked right at all the Republican House of Representatives members and said, no, you're here to represent us. Start voting our way.
Yep.
And we're taking note. We're taking note. And I'm not kidding. Physically showing up, because that's our building. Yeah. It's our building. We have a right to see what's going on in there.
Absolutely. Until the people instill an equal or a greater, even better yet, a greater amount of political fear into the minds of their legislators.
Nothing's going to change.
And you have to compare it. Well, you're like, equal to what? To what their leadership does. Yep. Keep in mind, leadership keeps them in check and in line with threats of various things. And until the people are willing to do the same thing and say, essentially, do what you said you would do, or we're going to kick you out of office. And
so, like, if you're sitting on the ethics committee, but you're not representing your people, should you be sitting on the ethics committee?
Yeah.
I'm not naming names.
Oh, there's a couple of them. Probably all of them, actually.
I'm just saying. Yeah. Erik, one closing thought about how this has affected you on a personal level, and I mean, I know you had to go take your family. I think what your family was telling you is that they wanted you to go away for the weekend. I think you misunderstood them. So, but anyway,
Uh,
how's this affected you? How hard has this been on your family, and what can we there again just do to support you?
well, thanks for that question. That's never been asked. I knew it would be a challenge. I still work full time, and so I knew it would be a challenge for sure. But like my wife, at about 6 o'clock tonight, she says, "So, where are you going tonight?" I said, "Well, tonight actually, I'm just doing something from the basement." Um, so it is. But it's rewarding too. I feel like I'm making a difference because people ask me to do your show, and I've got another thing going on next week. I'm in Rochester again, actually, in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah,
Um,
where are you going to be?
at that same church on a Tuesday morning group.
Oh, the free speech forum.
Yeah, yep, exactly. I'm going
When
up to Little
is this?
Falls for an event,
When is this?
August 10th.
So August 10th in Rochester.
Yep, August 10th, that Tuesday morning.
Oh, I will have
So
to.
I'm doing a lot of stuff like this, but I think it's important to get the message out there. My message is way different than anybody else down there because
Mhm.
theirs is all, well, you know what their message is. But I'm trying to make sure there's this new level of transparency and people know really what it takes to hold them accountable and achieve some real meaningful results, and trying to help lead the way at the Capitol. So it has been a challenge for the family for sure. But they're troopers, and my wife is like not political. So
Oh,
when I
don't
come home, she
I
doesn't even want to
understand
hear
that.
it.
Trust
So
me. Mm.
yeah,
My
so
wife's like, another video. Seriously, seriously.
yeah,
Like, hey, I got time on my hands right now. So, well, and that's the thing is, behind every one of these people, whether it be a guy or a gal, there's a family. 98% of the time, there's a family, and they're sacrificing too. This isn't just Erik that's doing this. His wife and his kids are giving up things that a lot of people will never understand. I am going to ask one last question. I want you to look over your shoulder out your window.
yeah.
Whose flag is that?
Oh, well, that's my flag actually. Um, yeah, it's not what you would think.
That's why I'm
That's
asking.
actually, yeah. Well, that's a fair question. It's actually the flag that flew over the Capitol building on February 8th of this year, the day that I dropped the articles of impeachment against the governor. So I knew when I dropped those articles, I wanted the flag on top of the Capitol that day, which you have to provide, and then they give it back to you. So it's kind of weird, but to me, I thought, well, how often do you get to file articles of impeachment against a tyrannical governor? So I wanted something to kind of commemorate that day. Unfortunately, only 2 Republicans in the entire state of Minnesota are willing to co-sign articles of impeachment against the governor, which goes again to show they lack the political or the intestinal fortitude to actually fight for
They
what they
don't have any
believe
nuts.
in.
Let's just be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah, that's what my
And
point
that's
is.
that's the most vulgar you. Okay, not there are times. There are times. Erik, I really appreciate your time, and you know what? You're a busy guy, and you got a lot going on, and now's work season. You have to actually go and actually work for your money right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to do this again.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm game.
I would like to do this again, maybe on a more regular basis. I'm not talking every week or anything like that, but I
Sure.
would like to have you on a more regular basis to give us updates and to continue to encourage people to come out of the woodwork, get out of the woods, get out of the rocks and cows country, and put themselves out there, even if they're not going to run for office, but to recruit people to run. And I don't mean run against the DFL. You need to start running in your own party, and that's what I know Erik wants people to like. No, find out what they're doing, and he's mentioned the links that people can go to get that information. Erik, thank you for being a voice. Um, you could be hiding all sorts of secrets right now, and at this point, to be honest with you, I don't care, because somebody who's rocking the boat this much, but they haven't been able to drum out, is doing something right.
Well, that's where I still firmly stand. I think I'm doing the right things. I didn't take an easy path, that's for sure. When there'd
What?
be far easier just to say, fine, I'll do whatever you people tell me to do. But that's not what I ran for, and it's certainly not what my constituents deserve.
And you'd lose. You'd lose. You'd lose.
Yeah, certainly leadership would say otherwise. They would say, no, you fell in line, we got your back. But anyway, I can live with a win or a loss in November 2022 as long as I've been myself the whole time. So I can go with either way. I can live with it.
Principle. It's principle.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate it, Eric. So I'm gonna boot you, and then I'm gonna finish because I don't want you to have to sit here and listen to me rant for the last couple of minutes. So I really do appreciate it. Let's stay in touch, and let's look at doing this again on a more regular basis.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
All right, man. You have a great one.
You too.
Here's the deal. People are going to have opinions. They're going to have opinions. And I meant what I said. Jen Carnahan, if you want to come on my show and tell me why it's okay for you to say we need to remove all of these yahoos from the Republican Party in Minnesota, Jen, I want you to come on here and look me dead in the eye, look me right in the face and say, no, TC, you and the Eriks and all of the other people that I know, we're not talking a couple, 50, 50 or 100 or 200. We're talking a few thousands of people in Minnesota disagree with you, Jen. Come on my program and tell me why we need to get rid of Erik Mortensen and why we need to keep people who are not doing what we've elected them to do in place. And if you think that you have an inside scoop on how Erik is dangerous for the party and dangerous for the cause of conservatism in the state of Minnesota in the Republican Party, then reach out to me. Reach out to me if you're from the new Republican caucus. Reach out to me if you're from the regular House Republican caucus. Tell me why, but on air. Have the courage of your convictions. Have the moxie, have the cojones to actually be honest about it. Until you're willing to do that, until you're willing to come on little peon TC's program, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, until you're willing to do that, I don't want to hear from you. I do not want to hear from you because you don't have the interest of the base, the conservative base of Minnesota in mind. So if you're one of those people out there that thinks you can arrange for me to have a conversation like that, make it happen. But until you do, I've lost. I'll treat you with dignity, but I have no respect for you. I'm tired of playing the games. The DFL is not our problem. It's weak-kneed, panty-waisted Republicans in the Republican Party and in Republican House and Senate leadership. It's time for you to go. It's time for you to go. And fight for your freedom. Fight for your liberty. Don't worry about whether or not you're safe and protected, because all that matters is that liberty. Sic Semper Tyrannis.